Dustin Martin lights up September once again. The Giant stopper claims another scalp in Sydney, and the top two teams lose in the first week of finals for the first time in 93 years. Hello and welcome to the final so far, presented by KO and Kane Cornes. All signs today looming towards a Richmond and Collingwood grand final. It's off the back of this man, Dustin Martin, 6 goals tonight, and put his prelim horror show behind him from last year.
Yeah, all four finals, a bit of an anticlimax, really. There wasn't anything spectacular about it, but this was the story, I thought, tonight out of this game. Just 14 disposals for Dustin Martin, but 6 goals. I thought excellent coaching from Damien Hardwick to identify perhaps a mismatch down there, and when he got hot, he didn't resist. He resisted the temptation to put him back in the midfield, kept him forward, and this was the result. So credit to the other Richmond midfielders. Thought Edward was terrific in the second half that allowed Martin to play forward. Now it's a bit of a dilemma for him to have in the prelim. We'll have a week to dissect that, but it's a good problem to have, isn't it?
Riewoldt and Lynch, they were pretty quiet. They only really came on late, so the small forwards were able to do the damage for the Tigers. But it could have been tougher had the Lions have kicked straight in the first half. They were on fire in the first quarter, the Lions, and had a few of these in the second term.
Yeah, they were exciting early, but I guess for a young side playing at home, you want to make the most of these opportunities. If you look at some of the numbers for the night, they had 10 more inside 50s, the Lions. They had 37 more marks, plus 11 in contested possessions. They win the clearances, more scoring shots, and lose the game at home. And this was part of the reason why. Now, maybe flattered them a little bit because I thought just judging it, Richmond were by far the better side. But this would have made things interesting, particularly early, if they were able to put some scoreboard pressure on and get this record Brisbane crowd behind them. They weren't able to do it. And as a player, that's so deflating when you continually miss easy shots.
How important was that, those misses for the Lions, and some of these young guys are not standing up on the big stage?
I just thought some of them were overawed. I thought there were at times where Raynor dropped the chest mark. You might say he was okay early, but he was overawed. I thought you didn't get the same impact from Berry and McCluggage. Hipwood was down, probably arguably his worst game for the year. So as much as you say it's just another game, young players, inexperienced players that haven't played in finals, the extra 5-10% intensity finds you out. And I thought Brisbane absolutely got found out by a much more desperate and hardened and experienced final side.
Looks like they might go into next week's semi without Mitch Robinson. He came off with a hamstring late. Now back to tonight, the big storyline leading in was Charlie Cameron against Dylan Grimes. What was Charlie Cameron going to do differently? Well, Grimes was all over him. 5 intercept marks in the first half.
Yeah, no, he was outstanding. I didn't think Brisbane used the footy well at all. I mean, that's not Charlie Cameron's strength. You'll see the amount of times that they kicked it to him in a one-on-one contest. That was one of the brief moments where he got some separation. But this stuff, one-on-one in the air to an opponent who's 200 centimetres, never going to work. There's another one there. So they needed to kick it along the ground, if anything, and give Charlie Cameron the opportunity to use his weapons and get out in space. And I also thought that Chris Fagan should have put him up the ground. You know, I don't mind having a go early, try and get the better of him deep. But once that didn't work, get him up the ground and try and beat him on the way back. Grimes likes to play close to goal, as we saw tonight. So I thought it was a missed opportunity. And perhaps Chris Fagan coaching from the interchange bench where you can't see the ground. It's worked for him all year, but perhaps it would have been better for him to sit up so he could identify that, because it was the same thing, and Grimes, I think he took 6 or 7 intercept marks on the night and was clearly continued on from the domination he's got over Cameron.
There was one moment he may like to forget, and it was this dive in the first quarter. Talk us through this one. There's been 2 players done for staging this year. Will he become the third?
Well, look at it. He's about to get an opportunity, Charlie Cameron, early on, which he needs to go back and have a set shot from 20 metres out. And that umpire is Chris Fleur. It is the poorest decision in the finals so far. I've got to say the umpiring standard across the 4 games, extremely poor. Now, the reason players continue to do that is because umpires continue to reward that sort of behaviour. They've got to take it out. I know there's a fine for it now, but yeah, that's a moment Grimes would love to have back. He'll be embarrassed watching that because that is not part of his makeup. He's a strong, courageous player, and that was a very ordinary effort.
The Lions will face GWS next week, and they were rampant today up at Giants Stadium, all over the Dogs, and maybe came into this final series as one of the teams flying under the radar.
Well, they were just going, weren't they? They'd won 4 out of their last 9 games heading into the finals campaign. But this was a tough, ruthless, relentless performance from a hungry side who didn't want to go out and not make an impact in September. This was Well, it was brutal. It was the most brutal display that I think I've seen physically any side go after the opposition like they did today. They targeted Bontempelli. We'll talk about that very, very shortly. But plus 36 in ground balls. They win the contested possessions by 42. Like 42 is a smashing. Now, that's the Dogs' strength. That was the Dogs' strength when they won the premiership back in 2016. Bit of talk about while the Dogs are on a roll, they could do it again. But if you look at the Western Bulldogs for the year, they got beaten by Fremantle, St Kilda, Gold Coast and Carlton.
Yep.
So perhaps we overestimated just how good the Western Bulldogs were, and they were shown up today.
Might be more bad signs for them in just a moment, but just on Marcus Bontempelli's lowest disposal count in 47 games today. And Matt de Boer, your man, you've been pumping him up all year, got the job done again. He's our Saturday star.
Yeah, and he should be, although they missed him, didn't they, when he was injured, and he had such a strong year. I thought in line for certainly squad of 40 in the All-Australian team, but it just staggers me. It continues to stagger me why more teams don't target the opposition's best player, because this is what happens. Every player in the comp is taggable. I don't care who you are, because there's a lot of people saying, well, Bontempelli's, you can't tag him because he's so strong and he'll just hunt the ball and win it. Well, that was proved to be a myth again today, and they didn't know what to do with him. Luke Beveridge at one point's got Bontempelli rucking up against Shane Mubman, which just goes to show the desperation coming from Luke Beveridge from his coach's box. He didn't know what to do to escape the tag, and cast their eye forward next week. It'll be Matt de Boer probably up against Lachie Neale, which will be just as good.
Just the 13 touches for Bontempelli today. Very quiet day for him at the office. Now, to our next point, this is incredible, this one. Brett Deledio played for the first time in 3 or 4 weeks with a calf, injured it in the first quarter, and has played out the game, but it looks like it might be his last game of league footy.
Yeah, and this is so emotional. It's just what footy means to a player. What a career it's been, and it would have been tough for him to sit back after this, knowing it's going to be his last game at AFL level, see what his former teammates did at the Gabba in Richmond. He missed out on that flag, of course, a couple of years ago then, so to see them go through to another prelim, whilst his time at the Giants hasn't been a failure by any means, but he just hasn't been able to get himself going. So sliding doors moment for Deledio, but he's been a star, 275 games across 2 clubs, and clearly an extremely popular team member with the way they sent him off tonight.
I heard him speak during the week. He'd done 30 or so soft tissues in his career. He did that one in the first quarter today. No one knew until he was getting chaired off. That's pretty courageous for him to fight through and keep his team with those full rotations. Now, Aaron Norton, if you thought the Dogs' day couldn't get any worse today, this happened late in the match. They're saying it's a lateral ligament injury, but it could get worse if he goes for scans tomorrow and that shows an ACL.
Yeah, it's just nasty. It's hard. It's really hard to watch. He was actually having a real impact as well. Just so athletic and such a star. So hopefully, clearly they're out now. So hopefully it is just that lateral ligament and they can get him going for the back half of pre-season and he won't miss too much footy. But if you're going to lose someone from the Dogs, it's probably Bontempelli 1 and it's probably Norton 2. So
he's not far behind.
Fingers crossed that all is okay, because he is a player with maybe the brightest future of any young star in the comp.
Back to Friday night, there can't be any more question marks over a side than what are over Geelong at the moment. This is their record now in games since that 2011 grand final. So strong again in the home and away season, but that finals record under Chris Scott gets worse.
Yeah, it won't go away. It'll be a dark cloud over them for a long, long time. They've been such a strong home and away side. I mean, if you look into it more deeply as well, win-loss since round 11, I think it is, and the record away from GMHBA Stadium this year has been appalling. So they were the side coming into the finals under the most pressure. And the first 15 minutes of that game on Friday night was just a disaster for them.
Dangerfield was able to stand up. He was the only sort of lone contributor, but Ablett and Selwood, 2 of their other bigger names, didn't live up to the hype.
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned about this. I mean, I just got to say that Gary Ablett's he's been the best player in my era. So certainly the best player I've played against and one of the best I've ever seen. But the end does come quickly. And whilst he's been really good this year and strong, watching him on Friday night, it was thinking to myself, you don't want that to be Jared Roughead next year. You don't want Gary Ablett to have the year that Roughead had. You want him to go out in the squad of 40 in the All-Australian, having a significant impact in his last year. So I'm not sure whether he should go on, just observing him. I know it's tough to judge on one night, but he looked like he didn't want the physical contest, as you see there on Friday night. Braden Maddock was great, but it was more the off-the-ball stuff for Gaz. He went to ground, he played for free kicks. And Selwood as well. By no means is it the end for Selwood, but I think Chris Scott needs to identify what is Joel Selwood's strengths, and that is to play on ball, hunt the ball like you have done. Once again, he just hasn't had the impact this year. He's almost had 200 less disposals this year than he did last year. I know he's playing a different role on the wing, but just not having the impact that he has had. So big calls for Ablett in particular next year. And then how do you use Joel Selwood for the remainder of this season and into the last 1 or 2 years of his career?
Talk about big calls. Chris Scott made a massive one before the game. 90 minutes before the game, it was confirmed that Reece Stanley would be out of that side. Mark Blitzarve's rucking. Bit of mixed messaging here from the coach during the week, and then finally admission after the game that he got it wrong.
Reece has been pretty good in the centre bounces. Grundy's strong there. He's strong all over the ground, but really with the around the ground stuff and Reece's athleticism, I think he's probably one of the few players that could challenge Grundy over a long period of time in terms of speed, strength and endurance. On balance, my opinion, and I'm one of 6 or 7 people who have a say in it. Yeah, I think over the next 24 hours, my assessment would be probably should have played him.
Yeah, like everyone, I think we were shocked that he did miss it. It wasn't the first time they've gone without a ruckman this year, and it has worked at times. But I was surprised because Stanley was really strong against Carlton in round 23, and I thought he played with the physicality that certainly warranted selection. So I like the fact that he admitted making a mistake, but clearly moving Blitzarve from defence into the ruck up against Grundy, who is the best ruckman in the competition and had 7 clearances. Collingwood kicked 4 stoppage goals in the first quarter alone. So it was a mistake. They know it. Was it the difference between winning and losing? Well, who knows? But safe to say, I reckon Reece Stanley will be back in against Nat Nui next week.
Absolutely. Now, Darcy Moore, all the doubts leading in about his hamstring, he got through with flying colours. He was massive in that last quarter and really repelled a lot of those Joel entries.
Now, I was wrong on this. On this show, I said I would have probably ruled Darcy Moore out for the whole of the final series. Now, Nathan Buckley went with him. He backed the medical team in and he got the reward. So, I'd still be a little bit nervous. The fact that he's only played sort of 1 3/4 games in 10 weeks leading into a big prelim final. But if he plays like this, then you can't argue that it was absolutely the right call from Nathan Buckley to play him. The unfortunate one was Jordan Ngoe. Now, if you're looking at what Martin has done for Richmond with that ability to go midfield forward, they're going to miss that from Ngoe. Certainly in the prelim, he's been ruled out of that, and who knows if they progress to the grand final. But that is maybe the only weakness in Collingwood at the moment is the fact that Ngoe won't be there.
And Levi Greenwood confirmed today ACL. Mitch Duncan, some concerns around his left knee. I don't see him playing much more in this final series. Now, Mel Haase, not many things get people fired up on social media than jumper clashes, and there was a fair one on Friday night.
There was indeed, and as you said, both players and fans alike were frustrated by this one. Brisbane's Alex Witherden, he took to Twitter to say that he really struggled with it and asked if anybody else was also struggling. Now, plenty of fans chimed in saying that they were having the same issue, including Stacey Lee, who asked, has there been a worse jumper clash in the history of the game, boys? So plenty of people confused, but probably the bigger issue I thought was it wasn't just people watching at home that really struggled with it. Several players after the game actually admitted in various interviews that they found it really challenging. Now, Tom Stewart was one of those. He said there were a couple of times when he was like, oh, hang on, that's the wrong bloke. So, boys, clearly everyone was confused, not just, as I said, people watching, but also the guys playing. So a fair issue. Now, Eddie Maguire has obviously been pretty vocal about the whole thing in the past 24 hours. And so I thought this next tweet was pretty interesting. Vince says, it's ludicrous that Collingwood staunchly resist a genuine clash strip while also dictating to Port Adelaide what they can and can't wear. Now, obviously, Kane, you'll remember all of that. So I'm keen to get your thoughts on this. I watched it and I found it so hard. I thought it was such a clash. Where do you stand on it all?
I can't believe it because in American sports, which is billion-dollar industries, the NFL teams change their jumpers all the time. NBA change it all the time. Soccer clubs change their guernseys. I don't get the preciousness of the Collingwood Footy Club about their clash strip. Now, AFL make a call on it and make them wear a clash strip. It was the same with Richmond. Finally, Richmond did agree to wear that predominantly yellow clash strip. I don't understand it. It's frustrating, and I guess the only one that continues to defend it is Collingwood.
The issue for me was the shorts. I reckon just keep Geelong in the white, keep Collingwood in the dark, everyone's happy. Yeah, I just still think, if we thought that the Crows and the Tigers were a clash, I think this is always going to be worse than that. So I think, something needs to happen in the future, and clearly that's what everyone thought on social media. Boys, one to finish here. I love a dedicated fan,
and this might take the cake for the year. Jim from Noosa, he got Trent Cotchin to sign his head at training today while the Tigers were up in Noosa ahead of their game in Brisbane, and then he went straight to the tattoo parlour, and that's permanently on his head now.
Got the dusty haircut as well, so a bit of a Dustin Martin Trent Cotchin combo happening on that head.
So we might, I'd like to see a bit of that from you. Thank you,
Mitch is losing his hair, so we'll get him to do it.
Oh, we meant to keep that for the pre-show stuff, Kane. All right, back to Thursday night. One man who's not losing his hair is Nick Naitanui. He was everywhere, back for his first game in 6 or 7 weeks, and absolutely dominated the Bombers.
Just his influence. He's probably the most influential man on the ground. I thought he got around the ground and actually had an impact with his 14 disposals as well. But just with the new rules and the new setups with the starting positions at centre bounce, he's even more influential in this sort of stuff. I mean, Shuey and Yo and Gaff and these midfielders, just they grow in confidence because they know they're going to win it. And then there's this, which is just team-boosting stuff.
Huge.
I mean, Sard's one of the quickest players in the comp. Naitanui over 100 kilos, and he chases him down. And that one on Snelling, like, bang, that is just team-lifting finals footy that, they're wrapped to get him back. And I think it's going to be really difficult for West Coast to do what they did again last year. But how good would it be for Shepherd and Gaff and that man, Naitanui, who is a cult figure, a cult hero in the West. So hopefully he stays sound for the rest of the finals.
And he's free to play after getting off only with a fine for that throw on Zach Merritt. Just quickly on the Bombers, John Worsfold not convincing post-game on his future. Said he's got a contract, but still no assurances on whether he'll be there next year. This is going to be a big one to watch in the next 4 or 5 weeks.
They've got to come out and say, yep, he's the guy, and he will coach us next year. They need to alleviate all that pressure. Well, if they don't know, they're going to make up their mind pretty quickly because there's planning, pre-season, there's a trade period, list movement, there's assistant coaches you want to recruit and things you need to do. You want to know who the coach is to be able to do that. So Essendon needs some leadership, and either he is the guy or he's not. If he's not, move him on and tell him and tell the fans because the club's been bitterly disappointing this year. All
right, you'll be able to watch the Eagles next week on KO. KO lets you instantly stream over 50 sports, including every match of the 2019 Toyota AFL Final Series. Don't forget you can catch up on any of the games you missed in the KO Hub with all this weekend's matches, all the classics and more available on demand, ready to be watched at a time that suits you. Of those 50 other sports, Kane, the US Open finals, they're ramping up over the weekend, the Formula One Italian Grand Prix, and I'm loving the Australian Boomers. They're on fire at the moment in the FIBA Basketball World Cup.
Serena chasing her 24th record equalling, and Rafa going for number 19 at the US Open.
You're all over the tennis as well. Now, how about next week's fixtures? They've just come through, finalised. Geelong looking to avoid going out in straight sets against the Eagles. That one is going to be at the MCG.
Yeah, of course it will be. Unfair once again for Geelong. And then at the Gabba, this one will be interesting. Giants will fancy their chances against Brisbane, but you'd expect the Lions to bounce back at home.
All right, Brett Deledio won't be there for the Giants, but he almost got something to go home with tonight. We didn't know that he injured it in the first quarter until the final siren. Talk us through this one.
Oh, he wants the ball. His last game, we didn't know it, but he just says to the umpire, do you mind if I keep this? I'll keep it.
He's allowed to do what he wants, Lids, isn't he?
Oh, I think the umpire took it back. Didn't sense the moment, the umpire. But I'm taking this one.
All right. Thanks, Kane. Thanks, Horsey. Hopefully you bring that back for next week. Same time, same place here on the round so far, the final so far.
Modra!